Great, so we should be live. For those of you watching at home, thanks for joining again. It's been a week since I've talked with you. We will skip the COVID update for today. I will do that in a different social media post because I want to get to our very, very esteemed special guests. And this topic is, as you all know, one of my near and dear to my heart favorite topics to talk about. It was my previous career. I was a horse trainer both here and in Illinois. So we get to talk farming and agriculture today. So I'm going to let you guys introduce yourselves here. Chair Poppe, we'll start with you if you just want to say where you represent and your title and all that good stuff.
Absolutely. Thanks, Addie. I am thrilled to be here. So this is going to be fun. I'm Jeanne Poppe. I represent District 27B in the Minnesota House. So I'm in the southern part of the state, Mower County mostly. Austin is my where I live and the regional center of my district. And so we are just on the Iowa border, just north. I currently serve as the chair of the House Ag and Food Finance and Policy Division. Last 2 years ago, when we took the majority in the House, I wanted to be the ag chair and was thrilled that I was able to do that. And we also then added just the words food, you know, to ag and food, just because I think it's important to bring people into the conversation who maybe wouldn't always be thinking that agriculture is important to them, but by golly, it's important to all of us throughout the entire state and nation and world. So that's why I'm happy that that's the name of the committee that I chair, and happy to work with Addie in other ventures in the Minnesota House. So just thrilled to be here.
Thank you so much. Senator, go right ahead.
Well, thank you, Addie. Thanks, Chair Poppe. Thanks, Stu. Thanks, everybody. I, too, am thrilled to be here. Addie is an incredible candidate and just very cool to talk about agriculture. If we have not met, my name is Nick Frentz. I live in beautiful North Mankato and represent in the Senate District 19, which is Mankato, North Mankato, St. Peter, and about 19 rural townships in Nicollet, Blue Earth, and LeSueur County. I'm very proud to serve on the Senate Agriculture Finance Committee. And although I did not grow up on a farm, I have spent as much time on it as I possibly can, and I was on a farm earlier this morning, although that was primarily to see if I could find any pheasants, which is a different Facebook Live event. And the answer to the question is I could not. The only upside was neither of my partners could find them either, but that is a different story. We are very proud of Minnesota farming. It's no secret that Minnesota was based on agriculture, and that not only does it drive about $20 billion of gross domestic product, but it also represents part of our culture. And so looking forward to the chance to talk with all of you today about where we've been and maybe a little bit about where we're going once Addie joins the Senate.
Awesome. Thank you, Senator. And last but not least, Mr. Lourey.
Thank you, Addie. Well, it's such a pleasure to be on here and such an honor to be included with Chair Poppe and Senator Frentz, folks who know much more than me and have a much larger hand in shaping the future for family farms in our state. But I work with Chair Poppe and Senator Frentz and others in the legislature as the government relations director for Minnesota Farmers Union. Minnesota Farmers Union is a grassroots organization. We represent family farmers and rural communities at the state capitol. And one thing that I try to ground myself in is that we've been doing that for a long time. The first Farmers Union chapter was founded in 1902 in Texas. Minnesota was chartered in 1918. And we came out of the co-op movement. It was farmers who weren't getting a fair price in the marketplace and were getting charged too much for their inputs. And they decided that if they organized themselves to buy inputs and organize themselves to sell their products, they'd have a stronger voice in the marketplace and would create a better economic future for themselves. And so I think there's a lot of parallels between the organizing then and the organizing that we need to do now, and the challenges that we're facing today. And I grew up on a farm, a small farm in northeastern Minnesota. We did organic apples, which was a ton of fun, in addition to being a lot of work. And we had grass-fed beef. And so I love agriculture. I feel like it's a fantastic way of life. And I think something that I ground myself in is, you know, wanting to make Minnesota a place where everyone can have the opportunity to live in a rural community, build a life there, and build wealth for themselves and their families through agriculture. And I'm really excited to work with someone who has a background in agriculture. Addie, you probably know this, and folks might have mentioned this on town halls in the past, but you have a history in horse training, as does our Commissioner of Agriculture. Tom Peterson was also a horse trainer before he went into politics and advocacy. So I think that's a great legacy, and I'm looking forward to working with you in the Senate.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. You know, I keep getting questions of, you know, you guys are working really hard and you're always out there, you're always making calls. How do you sustain that? Because I grew up on a farm. This is just what you do. That hard work, you know, learning, you know, responsibility and hard work and not giving up, that pays off. It pays off in all kinds of forms. So appreciate that. All right, so we, again, you know, folks that watch the town halls every week know that you can ask questions in the comments. If something comes up, just pop it in the comments and I will share it with our guests here. But we have prepared some questions ahead of time as well. So we'll get into those to get the ball rolling. So Minnesota has a long history of thriving farms, especially small family farms. And certainly here we're in the high 600s-ish for a number of farms here in Carver County, mostly corn and soybeans and dairy for sure. We're about 60% farmlands here in Carver County. So it is a big deal here. That's certainly decreasing as Carver County is attracting folks from the cities that are moving out here to places like Chan and Chaska, Waconia, Watertown to settle down. So I wanted to get your guys' opinion on how popular is farming really? Are we seeing a decrease, an increase? What does kind of the lay of the land look like? We'll go reverse order. We'll go Stu first.
Sounds great. Well, starting out with an easy question, Addie. I mean, I think it's obviously a complicated answer, right? I think you ask, is farming popular? Do people want to farm? Absolutely, right? It's a great way to raise kids. It's an honest way to earn a living. And I think, you know, there's a lot of people who want to do it. I think the challenge is that it's really hard right now, right? And so I think that's the, you know, we are seeing farmers leave the business. We're seeing farms go out of business. And, you know, we're seeing young people face a lot of challenges and headwinds as they try to build their farm businesses in rural communities. And that connects to a lot of issues, you know, some of which are, you know, within Chair Poppe's purview on the Agriculture Committee, but many of which are outside of that too. Challenges like rural healthcare, access to broadband, which we were talking about as we were logging in, Addie. But, you know, I think it's going to take a really holistic approach. But I mean, absolutely, folks are interested and eager to build a life in rural communities through agriculture. And I'll say in my role with Farmers Union, I talk to inspiring folks who are working to do that all the time, right? And you know, and I think we're lucky in Minnesota, and, you know, it might seem we're still facing a lot of challenges, but we're lucky to have a lot of great work to build on. You know, a couple programs that I'm sure you'll be a great champion for in the Senate, and I know Chair Poppe and Nick Frentz are the Rural Finance Authority in Minnesota, which is a really unique organization. It's a you know, a state funded lender that helps buy down interest rates for young farmers and others who are, you know, trying to reinvest in their operations. We have a whole suite of grant programs through the Agri program with the Department of Agriculture that help young farmers get started and reinvest in their operation. And something that I know Chair Poppe championed and we're always working to build on, but is the beginning farmer tax credit in Minnesota, which helps young farmers who are trying to get on the land, make it so that current landowners can afford to sell to them. And so I think there's a lot of incredible work, and certainly folks want to be on the land. The challenge is getting them there and making sure that they're successful once they are.
Absolutely, yes. Chair Poppe or Senator Frentz, I know you guys both represent areas that are also kind of mixed like Carver County is. What are you guys seeing and hearing as far as popularity?
You go, Jeanne.
Okay, I would, thanks, Senator. I think again, agriculture is such a wide and varied field. People sometimes just think about agriculture as being farming, but I had the opportunity to be on a farm this week and ride the combine as they're combining and both soybeans and corn. And it was just, the technology that's available today. So somebody can be in agriculture if they have a computer kind of brain. If they can be in agriculture, if they have a sales effort and they're doing that. They are in agriculture if they really do love the land, love their animals, want to be able to raise their families in a rural setting, but also in the metropolitan area. I mean, I do represent Spamtown, USA, which includes Hormel. It's a Fortune 100 company in Greater Minnesota, which is unusual, but it's been around for decades, and people are able to know the Spam brand and know Hormel and know Cure 81 ham and all of those things. And that's because of the work they've done to nurture this area in agriculture and bring people into that effort and make sure, they do feed the world. And many farmers are doing things because of that kind of quality of life and that initiative that they have in order to be able to support farming, agriculture, feeding the world, all of those things. So yes, beginning tax credit is important. A number of people trying to get into farming have found that just the high cost of purchasing land, purchasing equipment, all of those things are really something that we have to try to draw down and or provide other resources in order to be able to allow them to do that. But we also have a number of farmers that as they've aged, they want to transition out of farming. So kind of that loop, helping them to create the loop that if they're wanting to get out, but they don't have relatives or other people that they know to kind of pass down the farm to, that there are other people around who want to participate in that. So, and then another initiative that I'm just going to throw in is making sure that we have ag teachers throughout the state, because people who go into agriculture, oftentimes they might have been from a city or a farm, but they had some exposure to it while they were in high school, and they were able to participate in an ag program and FFA, 4-H, things like that. If we can get people to understand what the opportunities are, then that definitely leads to a number of people who would choose to go into agriculture. So it's definitely something that has a bright future. And we have a number of people who come forward that we're excited to have them join and be a part of the agricultural team that goes across the spectrum.
Definitely. Senator Frentz, want to add anything?
Just a little. First of all, I agree with Stu and with Chair Poppe. Those are points about how we want to make it better for beginning farmers to get on the land. I think that's our number one goal as we transition what's essentially a little bit older rural community and farmers, and what can we do to make it better. But I go back a step, Addie, when the question is it popular? Of course it is. It's going to be popular as long as human beings eat food. And we want to continue to show that. I think one of our jobs as legislators is to make sure that everybody in Minnesota knows what it's like to live on a farm and to enjoy a rural lifestyle and raise those kids out there. We are so proud of these farms in Nicollet County. I go driving out there. I'm such a nut for it. I just think it's so cool. And I think the more we show that to everybody in Minnesota, the more we'll find good matches, people that are well suited to a life of farming. And it has its ups and downs economically, which unfortunately it's a little bit of a down right now, but it's going to remain. And we're going to be strong in it. And we have some of the best farmland in the country right here, and some of the best farmers and some of the best ag business. I have the funny feeling we can make it. The commodity prices present some challenges, and both the chair and Stu pointed out another challenge is that land prices present something of a barrier of their own, which the Rural Finance Authority can help with. But when you're talking about $8,000 an acre, we just don't have a bunch of 23-year-olds that are ready to get into a multi-million-dollar loan. And I'm not sure that we have the answer to that because it has tax implications, a lot of other stuff, but the families would like to pass that land down. And I think government has to have a role in making that as easy and as fair as possible. So A, it's popular. B, we're doing well. C, we could do more. D, we cannot have these commodity prices stay this low. And I'm assuming I'm not supposed to get into the federal trade issues just right this minute.
We can certainly. You're transitioning right into that next question anyway.
Think of it. It would not be like me to bring it up.
Yeah. So, and we've gotten this question, you know, on the, I want to say on the doors, on the phones, that, you know, the federal actions have impacted our agriculture community here in Minnesota so much. What does that look like? What are those impacts, and how difficult is it going to be to kind of climb out of that or combat that from a state level? So, Senator, if you want to start on that.
No, I'm going to have the chair and Stu go, but I'm going to give this body English, and I'll get my turn at the end.
Yeah, I'll jump in just to say, certainly there have been many challenges, and you know, farmers are resilient. That is just their basic nature. That is why, I mean, they're risk takers. That's, you know, not, you know, I think especially when you think about it, for some farmers, you know, if they age, you know, at 20, they start their farming and they know they have 50 growing seasons. I mean, you know, for all of us, if you're doing something 50 times, you might be thinking, oh yeah, that's in a year. You might do one thing every week for, you know, 50 out of 52 weeks. These are people who, you know, do this if they're going to grow some crops, and, you know, they just know that they're going to be planting in the spring and harvesting in the fall. And hopefully, you know, out of those 50 times that they might be doing that, that they have a pretty good outcome every time. That would be helpful. And so and they're very dependent on a market. And if the market is soft, if the market is taken away from them, if the market is somehow adjusted not to their advantage, that creates a problem. And I know that, you know, it doesn't matter if you're a Republican or Democrat, everybody wants to earn the living and earn their money and be able to say, yes, I was, you know, I'm a farmer and I went to the, I grew this, I took it to market, I got the money back, and, you know, you feel good about that. So trying to just, you know, kind of bring in other ways of paying for things, certainly that's helpful. And we want our farmers to be able to thrive and survive, especially during tough times. But what they really want is to be able to have a market that does allow them to grow either animals or crops, be able to do that and be able to earn a paycheck that is authentic to what their product is or what they've been doing. So I think definitely challenges, and, you know, right now some things are looking up, but, you know, it always then seems like the shoe can drop, you know, the other shoe can fall, and you're kind of like, okay, now we're back at square one again. So trying to make sure that, you know, we're there to kind of catch them. The federal government can be there to catch them, but what are we doing to actually grow markets, both locally and globally?
Yeah, we can definitely echo that in our community here too. One of my, and I've told this story, I'm sure before, but one of my very favorite conversations from 2018 was with a hog farmer in Dahlgren who, you know, was trying to fix some piece of equipment when I pulled up, and it was sunset, and I'm sure he didn't want to talk. And he ended up sharing his life story with me, basically. And at the end of the conversation, he said, we're not looking for handouts. We're not looking to rely on government assistance. We just want a good price for our product. And that's it. They're not asking for much. So I'm excited to get in the legislature and support folks like that here in our community. Stu, did you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, that's an important story, and I absolutely agree with that farmer, and I absolutely agree with Chair Poppe, and, you know, to pull out and maybe build on one point, but just that for many farmers, they rely on that market, and it's a global market. And so trade is absolutely critical. And I feel like one piece that's sometimes missed in the, you know, media reporting on the trade war, which was erratic, right? It's not that we didn't need to hold China accountable, right? They're a bad actor, but the idea that we could do that on our own, or that it was in our best interest to try to do that on our own, I think was fundamentally misguided. and that's, part of the issue that we find ourselves in. But the piece that's missed is that farmers in so many ways built those international markets and are building those international markets for themselves. So it's not something that, is just kind of this thing that evolved and then it was taken away and, oh, we should have planned more. Farmers, they pay into a checkoff and finance trade missions and go build relationships abroad in order to have that security. And then, so to have those markets, kicked out from under them in order to punish someone for, acting poorly in another sector, that really is, it hits folks hard. And there is a fundamental unfairness there that I feel like sometimes isn't appreciated. To build on what Chair Poppe said and what we can do in here in Minnesota, it is hard. Like, these are for commodities, these are international markets. We can elect good leaders to go to Washington and hold our next administration accountable to more measured trade policy and more thoughtful trade policy. I think that's something we can do. But another thing that we can do is build those local value-added markets here in Minnesota. One is the ethanol industry. That's something we talk about a lot. It's not the end all be all. We're still going to need those markets and we're going to need to build new ones, but having a plant, all the better if it's a farmer owned plant where farmers can go and have another market for their grain or a part of that kernel is really, really valuable. And same thing, Chair Poppe, last budget cycle and Senator Frentz, you worked on this as well, but an initiative from the soybean growers building a new soy crush facility out in Crookston for another value-added opportunity, looking for those local uses and making sure that we're adding that value here in Minnesota, where more of the money stays in our rural communities. So I think those are certainly things that we can focus on here.
Absolutely. Senator Frentz?
Oh, I don't think about this much. Thank you, Addie. And I mean, I want to start with what I really see here, which is both Chair Poppe and Stu are much nicer than I am. These are markets that these farmers built themselves over years and didn't need any special favors to get them set up. And we had great relationships with a lot of countries, including China. Ask me the number of times a farmer in my district said, boy, I'm really tired of China buying all our soybeans. Take your time. And so to see those markets disrupted by federal trade policy that was alleged to be because of the theft of intellectual property, which the rest of the international community did not even buy necessarily, but had nothing to do with their farmers, is probably the single most irritating thing that I've seen farmers react to in my time in politics. The second most irritating, without a doubt, was the ethanol waivers, which has to do with people that grow a product we call corn, which they grow here locally, and then they sell it. And the ethanol waivers decrease the price of corn, which the farmers here that sell corn tended to notice right away. And so both of those moves were beyond the control of state government. Or I don't know what we would have said as a Minnesota state legislator. Both parties would have been jumping up and down at the ethanol waivers. The president visited here in Mankato, and there was a full page ad. Wouldn't you know it? I just happen to have it right here, from farmers saying, we need your support. And then it said some other stuff that was more to the point. So the answer to your question, Addie, is we do have some challenges, and we, again, have the best land, the best farmers, if we can just go back to competing on an open market. But I think Stu hinted at one of the concerns of farmers in my district, which is it takes a decade or more to build up these markets. They can go away in the snap of a fingers. And I watch China not be so thrilled with some of the stuff some of our leaders say about them. And I'm just a little worried that it's like going into a downtown farmers market and saying, hey, I hate all you buyers of our products. You guys suck. Don't buy our products. They tend to remember that kind of stuff. That's been a country for 5,000 years. And I'm just a little nervous about how it goes. But I'll stop. Thanks for the question.
Addie, can I build on one thing that Nick said too, or Senator Frentz said too? Because I think it's important, and maybe I'll get a little outside of my area of expertise, but I think it's also important context for this conversation about China. But what are we fighting over there when we say we're cracking down on intellectual property rights? What is the American consumer or worker's interest in protecting intellectual property rights in China, right? It's so that American companies can manufacture goods in China and Apple won't have their, proprietary software stolen, which, Apple can make that argument, right? Or others can make that argument, but I think like it's up to us as, folks who, care about rural communities, manufacturing communities, farmers to say, hey, that seems like a little bit of a raw deal to fight for companies that are outsourcing to China for their right to enjoy the stuff that we guarantee here, which is intellectual property right, the government not interfering in your business, the government not, forcing ownership a part of your business. Those are great benefits of locating your company, here in the US or here in Minnesota. And so, we can have a conversation about fighting for those, but to add to Nick's point, the fact that we're damaging this relationship for farmers in a way that's going to take a long time to rebuild, and that farmers are paying the price for that is too much to swallow.
It is in an industry that's incredibly tough as it is, before all of the trade wars. So there's a couple questions in the comments that we will get to in a second. This is a perfect transition over into, how COVID has affected our farming industry and our agriculture industry. It's disrupted our entire way of life as we knew it. But how specifically has it impacted our farming community? I'm not sure who wants to take that first.
I can give you my short answer, which is the greatest impact on our local farmers has to do with the meat processing plants where we had the outbreaks. Nicollet County, I think, is number 3 or number 4 in pork production in the state, and that's saying something. The 1st congressional district, I think, is number 1 in the country in pork production. And when the processing plants went down, it led to this horrific situation where they had to euthanize thousands and thousands of pigs, which not only was, an emotional development. You don't, raise a pig so you're just going to kill it and not have it be used, but also had a significant economic impact, including on some of the newer producers back to our beginning farm. So in my estimation, that was the single greatest heartburn. The other one has to do with restaurants not being at full capacity. And so that has a direct effect on some of the pork production in particular, but farmers in general. That's as short as I could make it. It's short.
Yeah, that was good. I'll just jump in. I'd say, certainly what Senator Frentz has said is absolutely accurate. The fact that not every farmer who grew hogs or turkeys or whatever that couldn't get them to the market. There was a time period there when those were closed, and so if they were in the queue at that point, that dramatically impacted them. And as he said, depopulating, euthanizing animals many times meant they had their own gun and they were shooting them. So that's a great emotional toll for those farmers. We also have dairy, is another that's had some really tough times over the last number of years. But in addition to restaurants and the packing houses that are shut down, just schools, the disruption of not having kids going to school and having that lunch program at school meant that some of our farmers, the small farmers that might have been a niche market or been the vegetables for that school, they might have lost out in that market and in having that. But also just trying to make sure that people going to the grocery store were able to buy whatever it was they wanted. If that was milk, for instance, and I know that was there was some. It was unclear, that lack of clarity about, is the product available or not, and how much can you purchase, and all of those kinds of things. So I think farmers every single day continue to do the work that needs to get done, because you have to do it. It is a daily or hourly process, so you're doing the work. But if you don't have that, again, if the market kind of falls out from under you, then your time is spent trying to recapture that market, find a different market. I know that the commissioner and Department of Ag did just a tremendous job of trying to help farmers throughout the state find maybe individuals who are able to take animals. Certainly they worked with Hmong, they worked with Native Americans, they worked with people who would do some of their own processing. They did a lot to upgrade packing, not the packing houses, but the small butcher shops, so that they could take on a few more. I mean, maybe if they went from, killing 10 animals a day or processing that up to 30, that wasn't significant necessarily in the whole scheme of things, but it might have meant that some of our farmers and people who were purchasing those animals had a place to go. So I think, it was just so many aspects. And Senator Frentz knows this, we've been talking about African swine fever for, the last 18 months, 2 years, trying to be prepared, because that when and if that happens and we will have a shutdown, what that will mean and how that's going to be. COVID-19 was kind of like the African swine fever, but it was more abrupt and it was more damaging, because it was the packing houses. The animals were healthy. It was where they could be taken that the humans were the ones that had the virus. So I think, like I said, they continue to do their job every single day. They continue to, do the work that needs to be done. But again, markets matter. We were able to do some things with Second Harvest Heartland, because we also have, on the flip side of having an overabundance of meat or poultry or milk, we have many hungry people in our state. So trying to make sure that there were funds to be able to kind of reroute things through a food shelf, the hub of the Second Harvest Heartland, so that more people had access. I know locally here, again, home of Hormel, and they did a tremendous job of making sure that our seniors got meals especially during the beginning stages of the COVID shutdown. So they were able to transport. So they quickly turned everything into gear and were able to compile food and then get those out to the senior citizens, but also our school children, making sure that there was transportation and locations where families could pick up food. So it kind of created a much keener awareness about how things worked and where there were gaps, and trying to fill those gaps. So I think it's, we're not over with COVID-19. Hopefully we won't have, packing plants that are closing again or shutting down anytime soon. So I think we're kind of back on track with that, but definitely there was an impact and it was felt.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll agree and echo everything that's been said. I mean, the closure of the large packing houses was the first, and I think most intense and acutely felt by the agriculture community, and that ripples out too. A lot of folks who are doing corn and beans are doing hogs, or have a neighbor who is, or have a barn with turkeys. So, I mean, it really rippled across the ag community, and I'll echo what Senator Frentz said, and probably echoed about the closure of bars and restaurants. And the one piece that I'll pull out of there is, for those niche producers, I mean, one question is when, right before the pandemic, we have one member who always cites this stat, but people went from, it was the first time in the US where people were eating out more than 50% of the time. More than 50% of their food was eaten in bars and restaurants. And that went from 50% to zero overnight. And so that was devastating. I mean, we have members who are niche producers and they lost 90% of their contracts, just wiped out. And the question is what we're going to figure out COVID, but what's going to be the lasting impact on consumer behavior? And what is that going to look like? And are those markets going to be there again? Or are we going to have to be creative and build new ones? And And both Chair Poppe and Senator Frentz, and along with the department, have been really creative in trying to help producers figure out new ways, like ways to market online. Processing is absolutely key. I mean, it seems fundamental, but it's like, if you're a producer of livestock and you're going to sell that livestock, you need processing. Like, that's like, it's that simple. You know, you can't sell someone a whole hog unless you're selling to my cousin who can hang him in his garage or something. But that's kind of, that's few and far between. So it really is critical, and it's something that we need to figure out. The other thing about those niche producers, and you know, I should dig up some data on this, but, you know, from our membership, my strong impression is when you're talking about what the department and what the legislature has called emerging farmers, so young farmers, farmers of color, folks who are, you know, underrepresented in agriculture and are kind of making their way in, you know, where they get their start or where they are now is in those niche markets. And so you know, it's hit them particularly hard. And the other thing about them, because they're, you know, creating new markets that we might not even know about, they sometimes are left out of, in particular, federal aid, especially stuff that's put together quickly, because that needs, you know, if you're going to put together a program that needs to be rolled out next week because folks are hurting, it's going to be simple. It's going to be payment rates. It's going to be what we know about the commodity market. And if you're selling, you know, sheep cheese to restaurants, like it's going to be, you're not going to be captured by that. And so that's a really important gap for the state to fill and for us all to recognize. And then just echo what Chair Poppe said about, like, you know, and it's a challenge, but it's an opportunity too. That's the framing that Commissioner Peterson in Minnesota loves to use, and I absolutely adore him for it. But, you know, the opportunity is that Chair Poppe is absolutely right. The pandemic has highlighted the fragility of our system. You know, I was just reading 89% of cattle in the U.S. are slaughtered at 50 plants, right? And so when you're talking about the vulnerability of the system to an upset like COVID-19, that's you know, we certainly saw that. Something that Farmers Union, we've preached for a long time, that it's really hard to have a voice as a producer or have a foothold in that marketplace and a place to negotiate from when the market's that consolidated. And so I think that's certainly something, you know, it's hard for the state to tackle, certainly, but I think there's a renewed recognition and an important one on the part of a lot of leaders that the consolidated nature of our food system is part of what left us vulnerable to this, and it's something that we need to fix.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think someone put it, I can't remember who it was, put it to me, you know, COVID is changing the way that we are able to advocate for ourselves within the current system that we have. And it's opening up a lot of new conversations and kind of creative solutions to different problems. So we're going to transition into a question that someone asked in the comments here. We're starting to talk more about sustainable agriculture practices and how that transition might work from, you know, more traditional practices into sustainable ag practices. And I always say that our farmers there's no one who wants to protect our land and water more than our farmers, because they live off of it. They make their living off of it. So the question in the comments was, how do we feel about factory farming? And I'm going to combine that with how we can, as a legislature, assist farmers in transitioning or expanding sustainable agriculture practices. I don't know who wants to take that one first.
Nick, or you want to go, or I can start with that one?
Stu, why don't you start?
Okay, that sounds great. Well, I appreciate the question, and a lot packed in there, certainly. You know, first, I think, you know, that framing is difficult. You know, I think it's tough for farmers who are, you know, working every day to, you know, provide what is really an essential service, right? Like Senator Frentz highlighted at the start, like, we need food, and farmers are fundamentally doing that. And there's, you know, and that's something that all producers share, regardless of their practices, and take a lot of pride and value in that. And I think you know, trying to lump farms into neat groups and say, hey, they're doing it this way, and that's not what we'd like, and other folks are doing it exactly right. No one's got the perfect solution, and there's a lot that we can learn from from folks across the board. I think one, to use maybe an example, and I don't know if this is helpful for the person that asked the question, but you're in Carter County, Addie. I remember visiting a farm there last year, small family farm, doing a lot around sustainability. Definitely a dairy, small one, primary labor is the family. What they were really excited to show me when I went there was that they got a robotic feeder. So they got literally a robot that they pour the different inputs in the feed. It mixes them together. It goes out and pours it for the cows to eat. And then what's even better is it comes back and sweeps it so that there's no waste. And there's two different ways to look at that. Someone who hasn't been on a lot of dairies or, might say, oh my gosh, that seems like the epitome of factory farm. What could be more factory than a robot? But this machine was also really closely tied to sustainability. They were getting a lot more bang for their buck with their feed. They didn't require as many inputs, which is kind of a key piece to making farms more sustainable. It allowed them to free up more time because they weren't doing that by hand with a skid steer or with a shovel. And so they could invest in other creative solutions and think about different ways to do things. And it was helping, make their farm more sustainable, so they could continue it into the next generation, more economically sustainable, so they could continue that into the next generation. And so I think, that's just one example of why sometimes it's kind of hard to, put a neat box around anyone. The other thing that I'll put a plug in for that, Addie, I hope, you'll be a strong champion for when you're in the Senate, but in Minnesota, we have a corporate farm law. So what that means is with few exceptions, if you're gonna own farm, we recognize that farmland is not a renewable resource. What we've got is what we got, and we need to defend it. And if you're gonna own farmland in Minnesota, you need to be a resident and an individual or a family, and you can't be organized as a corporation. So unlike other states, you won't see General Mills or Amazon or investors from California purchasing farmland, hedging that's going to become more important in the future. That's important to sustainability because, as you said, Addie, the folks who are living and working on that farm are going to be the best stewards, particularly if they own that land, because they know that investment is going to be there not just for them, but their kids and future generations. So that's a start to a very interesting and complex question.
Yeah, Chair Poppe.
Yeah, sure, I'll jump in. To say, factory farms, the majority of farms in Minnesota are family farms. They may be like the farm I was on this week. It's two brothers, nephews from a sister. It's like it's a large operation, but it's a family farm that has multiple generations, and they're all living close by and able to work that land, and they do vegetables and they do corn and soybeans, and they have some animals, and so it's all of those kinds of things. But it is a family farm. So, I think sometimes people look at size and think, that's a large operation, that's got to be a factory farm. And in reality, it's a multi-generational, family farm. So that's the first thing, just to kind of like, and farmers do take care of their land. They take care of their animals. They are looking for, but they're also looking for profitability. That's like, they're in this to, because they love the business, they want to continue to do it. It's a good quality of life, and it's a great way to raise a family and all of those things. But they want to make money, and they also know that making money means they have to be able to have good practices, because if they, burn their land to a point where it's not going to be able to grow any crops in 3 years, that's not going to be healthy for them. That doesn't sustain them. So it's definitely a lot of stewardship around that. And I would say in that, like, regenerative farms, we have a number of area people here who are looking at, and very strong advocates for regenerative farming practices and cover crops and, doing things that help. So you see green on the land. You don't see just stubble, or you don't see plowed under, dirt. There are definitely people who do more traditional, conventional farming that do it one way, and they may or may not be ready to make that transition. Others that are doing the transition with regenerative, others that are doing organic. And so, they all are a part of the kind of the quilt of the farming operation that you see throughout the state of Minnesota. And as Stu said, there's no one right way. There are all sorts of different ways. And as farmers, and so I'll put a plug in even for farm business management. Our Minnesota State system of colleges has farm business management instructors throughout the state who are available to work with farmers to help them to understand how to keep the books, but also how to, learn new practices. In years past, we've had extension agents, and extension educators from the University of Minnesota. They're also available to kind of help. So, their farmers are trying to learn best practices every year. They're trying to do what makes the most sense for them. And I think that, that we have a really good structure in Minnesota, and the corporate farm laws is a part of that.
Senator, anything to add to that?
Just again, echo what both Stu and Chair Poppe have said. Family farms, that's a term we use to mean that family cares about what's going on and they have a direct financial interest in it. So sustainability is how they keep that in the family if they choose to. It's also about how the soil health and the issues of sustainability impact the actual biology. I will say, Chair Poppe, if I may take this liberty, I share your sensitivity when I hear the term factory farms. You're welcome to join me in rural Nicollet County. Again, some of the most beautiful operations, just one family in particular, the Comparts. It's all the same family. It's 3 generations, and they have 96,000 pigs a year, and that's their family. We didn't tell the Walton family they couldn't have Walmart expand. And I'm a little sensitive to the suggestion that a farm family isn't allowed to make the most out of it within the confines of the requirement that Minnesota has, which I think is a very good one, which is you cannot be from out of state. You cannot be a corporation. I went to high school in Northern California, incredible agriculture out there, tomatoes in the part of the valley desert that I lived in. There wasn't a farmer in our school of 2,000 kids. It was a corporate farm, Anderson Farms, that's fine. But I think Minnesota gets a tremendous benefit from not just the agriculture itself, but from the culture that it brings. And I think we're luckier than we realize sometimes.
Yep, definitely agree with that, for sure. All right, so we have got to end at least by 3 o'clock. So some of us have other things to do right after this. So with our last couple minutes here, I want to get to kind of the most important question as we're looking forward in the next biennium and even the biennium after that. What are the top things that we should be doing as a state legislature to support our farming community and our agriculture business? Let's start with Stu on this.
Well, that's great. That's that's something that I certainly should have, figured out and clearly identified to articulate, particularly to the company that we're keeping on this call, Addie. But I think a lot of the things have been talked about on this call, right? One thing that I don't know if we have dug into as completely as we could have, and I think is really critical and kind of fundamental to everything that we talked about, but is access to financing. That's to buy land, to buy equipment, to buy seed. If you are a farmer, new, young, old, whatever kind of operation, it costs a lot to put a crop in the ground, to raise livestock at sale. And you're not going to have necessarily that money up front to finance it, right? And so, it's hard to imagine, but I mean, you've got, what I would look at and say as a small farm where you are, putting a massive amount of money up front, $500,000, and then at the end grossing, just a small amount over that and then paying the rest back. And that's just, part of the nature of it. And it's high risk. And so it needs to be a particular kind of financing. But I think that's really important. And I think there's a lot we can build on with the RFA and otherwise. I think another piece that we can do a lot with, which has already been mentioned, but is near to my heart since I grew up doing grass-fed beef. But like the meat processing issue, I think is really huge. And I think Minnesota particularly a little wonky, but we have a state inspected meat processing program, which is, not unique, but it is, not all states have that. And we have a really high performing one with a lot of state inspected plants. And so when you talk about kind of creative innovations, like getting another meat processing program started at Minnesota State, helping folks do on-farm processing, all of these things to help solve that problem for livestock farmers and diversified farmers for how do I get my product to market. I think that's really critical and kind of an exciting and high value piece for us to figure out here in Minnesota. So that's a couple things.
Chair Poppe, and then we'll end with...
Happy to. I think Stu started out talking about this a little bit too, is that a lot of, we do a lot in agriculture in our committee to help support farmers, beginning farmers, emerging farmers. Senator Frentz can talk about farm safety, farmer mental health, all of those kinds of kind of periphery things that we want to make sure are available, accessible to our farmers so that they can do the job that we ask of them to do. But there are other things, healthcare comes to mind, just the high cost of what that is to have access to healthcare and the affordability of a health insurance program. We need to do something to help. And that's for small businesses, independent people who are doing their own work, can be realtors or people that are self-employed, but farmers definitely and their families need to have access to healthcare and the health insurance kind of pool or whatever it might be. And we've done some work on that, but that could continue. Just broadband, we need to expand broadband, and we've talked about that too, that for all of us, we need to, a farmer, again, the farm that I visited this week, he pointed out the long pole, and at the top of the pole, he said, yeah, that's our internet. And sometimes it's great and other times it's not. And so then, you have to find it. And when you want to put something in, you're trying to sell something or do something, it needs, we all know when it stalls out or when something happens, when we're on our computer, that's very frustrating. And it can mean that a sale is lost. So making sure that we have rural broadband throughout the state, in every corner, in every township road, we just need to make sure that we're doing more of that. And I think that that's something that if we can help in those two areas, that would reduce the costs that the farmers have, and it would improve their ability to reach those global markets.
Boy, amen. I thought the two things that I might try to comment on would be rural broadband and healthcare, and I have very little to add to each, but you may know, Addie, that we had a $27 million rural broadband bill teed up and had a lot of support for it. It didn't quite get across the finish line. I hate the message that it sends to kids growing up in rural Minnesota when there's inadequate internet. And how about COVID? We tell those kids you must go home and study, and some of them don't have an adequate internet connection. And hats off to you, Chair Poppe, for bringing up the issue of coaxial cable. I know coaxial cable is more expensive, but it is the gold standard. And internet that works most of the time is just not very helpful. It has to work all the time. And Addie, you'll find that there's a lot of debate about could we do something cheaper. And I think in a lot of ways, farmers understand you get what you pay for. And I think that's true in rural broadband. I also agree with what's been said about healthcare. It's driving some of our farmers crazy. And I think we should create a public option to allow farmers to buy in, to see just how terrible the government run healthcare would be, and to see how the rural healthcare clinics, doctors, and hospitals respond to that. I'm starting to hear from my good friends across the aisle that we can't have the public option because it will hurt the rural clinics and hospitals and doctors. And I don't want to do that. Some of my friends are rural doctors, but I would say this: are you now saying we can't reduce the monthly cost of the premiums for farmers' healthcare? Are you saying, well, we'd love to? Because there's no question a public option will be much lower per month. And I think we need to start sharing that option with farmers and with all of Minnesota and say, why can't we have a public option? If the government's so clumsy and terrible, you'll see it right away. I think what'll happen is that we'll see there's a transition, because honestly, fundamental change to our nation's healthcare system is not going to happen and should not happen with 51 or 52% of the population on board. We have to drive a consensus and get everybody to say that's the way we're going. I think it will be someday a single payer system, but I think a public option is a great way to show that it's not something to be afraid of, but instead opportunity. And meanwhile, our farm families will see a significant reduction in monthly premiums. And I wish that we as Democrats would make that a little clearer. We're talking about lowering your monthly premium. There's another political party, not saying which one they are, just saying, not the DFL, who apparently does not want to lower your monthly premium because it may in the future affect rural clinics and hospitals. And I'll just say one other shot. Sorry, Jeanne, I got going a little bit. That's the competition will solve this problem. Well, let me tell you, competition is whomping our rural clinics and hospitals. We have them closing right and left. And I love the Mayo Clinic as much as anybody, but they're beating these small providers and they're reducing rural access to healthcare. And unless the government steps in and says, no, we're going to have healthcare for everybody and it's going to be fair, I think that pattern will continue. Ask them in Sleepy Eye or Springfield or Comfrey how the competition approach is working, and they'll say, we can't do that. Chair Poppe represents the great city of Albert Lea. They made a proposal, how about we don't deliver babies in Albert Lea? Talk about messages that sends. So I think we do need to take a little bit of a step here towards a public option. And that, Addie, is my short answer.
I'm just going to correct the record. My senator represents Albert Lea. I represent.
I'm sorry.
But Albert Lea.
I think you and Dan Sparks as the two greatest legislators in Southern Minnesota. And so I just give you both credit.
There you go. Thanks, Addie, for the time today.
Yep.
Absolutely. I want to thank all three of you for being here. I know I consider you guys colleagues and mentors, all three of you, and I'm really excited to continue to foster these relationships and partnerships in the next biennium. So let's win this seat. Thank you all for being here today. This video will live on Facebook and we'll also put it on YouTube if you want to share it later. And if anyone in the comments has further questions, feel free to get in touch. You guys know how. So, all right, we'll let you go. Thanks for everything.
Thank you, Representative
Thanks,
Poppe.
Addie.
Thanks,
Yep, good, guys. Thanks.
Bye.